Hi, my name is Graham Alexander. I'm the current Commodore of this great club, Mornington. Really honoured to be the Commodore of at this historic time, celebrating our 70th birthday. We founded this club with a group of enthusiastic young members back in 1946 and have currently been sailing as a family club ever since. We have went through many years of terrific numbers in terrific classes, old classes like the heavyweight Sharpies and the Sabos and the Cherubs and the Fireballs and the Flying 15s, which some of those are currently being sailed. The club built to 1,000 members in 1980, and then after unfortunately the worst storm that we had hit in 1984, our keelboat fleet was decimated and the club had to then regenerate. The members got together and formed a way forward, and we founded the restaurant that we currently have behind us, which they went forth and built that, and we've now built the club back up again, and we're now seeing some really terrific numbers, especially in our juniors and our fleets going forward. Our keelboat fleet has had a really hard time. We've been fighting with this jetty and pier and things. It seems to be the only ever discussion we ever have around here was when are we going to get to harbour. Well, now we've got a pier, we've got a more safe harbour, we've got plans for the future, and our junior numbers, which is the best part of the club, have absolutely going through the roof.
I'm John Lynch, and I have been a member of the Mornington Yacht Club for 56 years. My grandfather is seen sitting on the boom of the yacht Violet, which had sailed down from Royal Brighton Yacht Club back in 1925. My father, Neil Brownbill, was very involved with the Mornington Yacht Club. In 1958 through to 1962, he was Commodore. I married John Lynch in 1964, and John became Commodore in 1992 through to 1994. Our two sons, Simon and Nicholas, sailed Sabos and other yachts at the Mornington Yacht Club.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to say a few words on this very important occasion, the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Mornington Yacht Club. I am now 91 years of age, and so I have recruited my granddaughter to give me a hand. And here she is. This is Megan Aquilina. Megan has recently visited Mornington Yacht Club with her parents, and they had a wonderful time, particularly in the rocks. Megan is a very accomplished dancer. She can do a lot of ballet, gymnastics, and she's very good at student. So she's giving me a hand, and I think, like most granddaughters, they're very good helping their grandparents. Now, in preparing this talk, I wrote a few words, and so I think they're worthy of being read rather than otherwise. And I'll just write this. If you feel depressed, anxious, nervous, solemn, or stroppy, I have the perfect answer. Go sailing. There is nothing I know that can change a person as quickly as the feel of the breeze, the sound of the water, and the motion of a yacht. As John Masefield puts it, I must go down to the sea again, to the lonely sea and sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. Now I'm going to show you a few of the yachts I've been associated with. So I'll ask Megan to focus the camera on the first one, the Eric, 34-foot centreboard yacht, 2 tons of lead on the keel, and we sailed her at Mornington from 1939 to 1943. She was a great yacht. Then, the next one I want to show you is Kittiwake, a 12 square metre, which I had for about 8 or 10 years with a fair amount of success. Then the next yacht, the next picture is an old picture of the Mornington Yacht Club. You'll recognise straight away all the improvements which are in these pictures here. Extent. Now, well, I want to show you something else which is very interesting too, so we'll go into another room. I'd just like to introduce Megan Aquilina once again. I'm sure she's got a few little stories she wants to tell, and so I said, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so all these years growing up, I've always heard of Pa saying all these stories about the Mornington Yacht Club, and I was like, what is this place? Wasn't until Pa's 90th where we actually got in contact with the Mornington Yacht Club, and we received some photos and a whole bunch of other information as well. So I started to get this picture in my head of what the Mornington Yacht Club was. But then again, it wasn't until this year where my family did a trip on to explore our history on both my grandfather's side and my grandmother's side. And we of course explored the Mornington Yacht Club. We had dinner there, and we really went back in time. We saw all these plaques on the walls with all the members, founding members, including Pa, and we saw his photo on the wall. We saw trophies, we saw a lot of things, even his name written under secular years. How many years?
Only 2, the first 2 years.
The first 2 years of the Mornington Yacht Club. So Pa's always really loved yachts, and he put love into the Mornington Yacht Club just like everyone, all of the founding members did.
Held the position of Commodore for 2 years.
Yeah.
Secretary 2 years, Vice Commodore for 2 years, Rear Commodore for 2 years, and Treasurer for 2 years. So I've had all those executive positions.
Yeah, and that really shows his love for sailing. One more really quick story. On our way to Mornington, we called up asking for a booking, and then we told them that my mum was the daughter of John Berry, and we, out of curiosity, we wondered what member's number he was. And the lady on the phone paused for a second and then told us that he was 001, he was number 1.
I hope you've enjoyed this little area of nostalgia, and I thank my granddaughter Megan for helping me. She's been doing all the hard work. Thank you very much.
Light shining as the sun, we've numberless days to sing God's grace. Then when we'd first begun,
Ted Ashton was Commodore at the time, and the yacht club consisted of a relocated Balcomani hut, which Ted had, being an architect, had spent some time in renovating and setting up as a very comfortable club building. I think there were about 70 members at the time, and they were mainly local people, with a few who came down regularly to their holiday houses at weekends.
There used to be a harbour master, had a little shed there, and I'll never forget, he used to come and say to Margie and myself, "Come in here and have a drop of sherry with me." And Marjorie she'd have a little sip, but she never knew whether his glasses were clean or not.
The fishermen in those days had double-ended cooter-type boats. There were about 5 or 6 of those when I first came to Mornington. They were professional fishermen. Some of them took out fishing parties. It wasn't unusual for them to go out fishing, and if the weather was right, to sail their boats home.
In those days, the pier went out, and it had an angle on it that went out at right angles to the northwest. And that's when the days of when the Waroona and the Hygeia paddle boats used to come in there, and we'd go for trips down to ports in Sorrento and the Hygeia and Waroona.
The club didn't have a rescue boat as such, and if we got into trouble out at sea, our parents would come down and bribe one of these fishermen to go out and tow our boat in and rescue us. But eventually this was happening fairly frequently, and the fishermen were getting jack of it, so Bob Legg, who was Commodore at the time, organised a cooperative project to build the first retriever. The core of the fleet really was the heavyweight Sharpie, and some of our people like life member John Berry and Kevin Willey sailed them, and a number of local identities in the town, some of whom are still alive today, were prominent heavyweight Sharpie sailors. They were difficult boats to manage. They were quite heavy. We had a little railway line which ran down alongside the club building into the water, and we used to launch them there with a great deal of manpower. Again, they were a problem if they were swamped in heavy weather, because they were open boats, and I suppose the most successful boats around the course were those that had the best pump hands, because it was almost a constant job pumping the water out of them.
All the boats were launched from Mills Beach. Then we used to tow them over to the start line, sail within the confines of the harbour. That was our racing. And then the club started building their own sabots, which I was fortunate enough to buy one.
We are greatly indebted to Mrs. Legg and Mrs. Willey. These two very kind ladies stood at the end of the fisherman's jetty with 3 flags which they held up. And 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes you started. The race went from a line to a buoy out from the fisherman's jetty, which you can imagine was no distant, almost like the hauling off points of the slipway now. And from there they went out through the very few boats that were in the harbour, out past the end of the pier, across to the Red Bluff, back to here, out to the Windward and return, and a triangle. But it was a lot of fun, and that's what really started it all off.
In the early days, especially sort of on the sailing side of it, I was very competitive on the water. There was a lot of sabots. We had probably 30 or 40 sabots sailing every Sunday. Also, that instilled a lot of competition with the older and the younger people down there.
Well, it became necessary, obviously, to tell them to pull the tiller towards them or push the tiller away or do things while they were learning to sail. And that's how I started, I suppose, teaching. Now, Ken Billam took me for a sail in a cat one day, and I was so impressed with this cat, the speed, it was wonderful, that I decided I'd get one too. Well, we then started rescuing the sabots from from the catamaran. And that was the origination of the rod rescue raft, as we all called it in those days, which you still have at the yacht club, because you could pull the boats up onto it and empty the water out and put them back.
The introduction of the mirror class back in the days when we were cooperatively building sabots and that sort of thing brought a lot of members into the club, a lot of members who became good club members and went on to take office in the club.
The sabots, we used to call it the Jennifer Willie system. Every child got a prize on prize night, and she arranged it such that the kids, no one was left out.
We'd always had a small keelboat fleet, but they really weren't actively interested in racing. I can remember the committee used to have to go down on hands and knees to fellows like Ron Hillis and Max Glover to get them to enter their boats in a race. The Hovel Light Trophy was the one race of the season that they agreed to do, but because it was always held on New Year's Day, we used to have to wait until the hangovers had cleared and set a reasonable time for them to get their crews together and get the races underway.
Mornington was a holiday area more so than it is now. The club itself wasn't that large because we only had the shed, and we progressed then to a shed on the beach, which is now still the same shed that's down there, but same area but different shed basically.
I think the other major factor was the era of Max Rod and Geoffrey Sutcliffe when we took over the reclaim and developed the new club facilities that are there today.
And we had to fight very hard to get that reclaim, and when it was eventually allocated to the Yacht Club, we spent £1,000. We had £1,100 in the bank. We spent £1,000 to put that fence, which is still there, right round that area. Subsequent to that, the Ports and Harbours took away some of it, as you know, but we've recently got that back.
And Ted Ashton he'd been a Commodore before me, and we got together, and he had a top hat the same time as I did, and we used to sort of talk about, doing some proper yacht racing. And so he got plans together and we got them approved and passed, and that's when we started building the yacht club.
And it sounded pretty good. So the first thing we would do was try and get the money for it. Well, we had a meeting at the yacht club at the present Sabo Club, which it was burnt down, that old one. And lots of people turned up, and of course the amount of money to be raised to get this thing was enormous. So anyhow, with some difficulty it was passed that night. So we set about how we're going to get the money. Went to the banks. Yes, they would help us, but 8 of us had to put up £1,000 as guarantors for the overdraft then, which, mark you, was quite a deal. And I think we raised the fees from probably £3 a year up to about £8 or £10. Mind you, there was a lot of complaints, but never mind, it got through. And subsequently we were able to get the yacht club.
I can remember a huge Sabo fleet, and it looked so exciting. I couldn't wait to get started, and I used to go out in the rod rescue raft, which later sank on its mooring, just where the Flying 15 crane is, and watching all the Sabos and thinking how exciting that would be.
1, 2, 3.
Mirrors in those days, of course, was the step up from Sabos, and I guess at their peak you'd have up to 40 mirrors racing every Saturday afternoon. So you think of the congestion there. When I was sailing in fireballs, of course there was the fireball fleet and the cherub fleet. At their peak I'd guess there was about 12 fireballs, 12 cherubs racing. So you've got 40 odd mirrors maybe at their best, and another 24 boats of the cherub fireball class. You've got nearly 70 boats trying to rig their, get their masts up, get their sails up. And in those days, of course, the yard wasn't concreted. It was just red earth, mud. If it was raining, it was mud.
There was no trailables to speak of in those days. Flying 15s were very big. Cherubs and fireballs were also big, and the mirror fleet was huge. And mainly mothers of sabo sailors in those days who decided if you can't beat them, join them. So got themselves mirrors, learned how to sail and became very competitive and very good.
And every year we used to have special functions, special hat parades, and Marjorie Beasley would provide a big basket where people would raffle for a prize, and we had lots and lots of functions to raise money.
When it wasn't sailing, we didn't go home if it was too windy. We all went up and played cards, and we all learned how to cheat really, really well. That was one of the things to master cheating on Sunday mornings when there was no sailing.
There was definitely those who sailed the fireballs and knew in their own minds that it was the better of the two boats. And there were the cherub people, and near the twain shall meet. And there was this healthy competition that lasted for a good 5 or 6 years between those classes as to which class was the better. They were both very good classes of boats, and it produced some excellent sailors, excellent yachtsmen.
After the kids grew out of sabots, the middle range of off-the-beach boats sort of phased away. And in my opinion, it sort of went from a small boat yacht club to an ocean racing type of setup. And that was, I felt, was a big change.
I was working out at Baxter, and I'd been also sailing on Rafferty's Rules with Hank Shorty. I got a phone call from my wife, from Michelle, to say that Hank was desperate to find me, and I phoned him, and then he told me that there was a bit of a problem down at the yacht club, and could I go down. I then raced down to the yacht club, just in time to see Rafferty's Rules dragging through the mooring area. What staggered me this particular day was the velocity of the breeze. You know, you could lean into the breeze, and when you look to the east, so driving down, you're looking to the right, you just saw these boats. It was just absolute devastation. White water. You couldn't sort of make out the boats because the waves are breaking so far out. They were breaking halfway between the pier and the beach. So you couldn't work out which boat was where.
Even before the storm reached its peak, 4 boats had been driven ashore. Their mooring chains, 5 centimetres or 2 inches thick, snapped under the constant pounding. Boats and moorings designed to withstand the worst the sea could offer were being treated with contempt.
At the moment, the wind here is gusting to 100 knots, maybe even more. And there's a real fear that if it continues, every boat out there is going to be ripped from its moorings. These huge ocean-going yachts are being tossed high into the air, and every so often they're pitching nose first, some 15 or 20 feet down the side side of a wave.
Some of the yachts began dragging their moorings, huge 2-ton concrete weights. They were being driven ashore, then other boats broke free and crashed into them. One yacht, battered and holed, simply disappeared beneath one huge breaker. Another capsized and sank within minutes. This boat, a $100,000 ocean racer, dragged its mooring more than 500 metres before its keel dug into the sand and punctured the hull. The beach at Mornington became a yachting graveyard, and some of the state's finest sailcraft had been reduced to worthless wrecks. One broken-hearted skipper tried in vain to save his boat. Strong winds and heavy seas drove him back to the shore. Soon afterwards, his boat snapped its mooring chain and careered through the surf to a beach a kilometre away. No one has yet dared to put a value on the damage, but tonight the Mornington Yacht Club fleet has been reduced by about half. 25 boats either sunk or severely damaged. Tom Bennett, National 9 News.
It was just unbelievable. It was like something out of a horror movie. It was no wind by the time I came down, and there was all these masts in the water and funny angles, and it was really eerie and dark, and it was just, you just wanted to cry. It was horrible. It was so sad. It was really probably the end of an era in the keelboats in the club. I think we had a lot of very big, fast boats at that stage.
The next day was probably one of those most fantastic days. You get the breeze out of the light zephyr out of the southwest. Beautiful waters, calm as can be. High tide because the tide was very high due to the storm, and it was just such a peaceful, idyllic spot. Unfortunately, scattered with all these, dotted with all these wrecked yachts. I mean, you cannot be too. You can't describe it. It was just terrific. I think people sort of, they weren't shocked about it. They just looked at it despairingly. But it's like any sort of disaster, lack of a better word. They all get in there and help. There was, and you see it in the yacht club. I've been there long enough to see the type of people that get down there. And they're just waiting to help. We had all the rescue boats out. We had people, the local builders' equipment, hire places were just giving us all the gear they could. Not a problem. I think the time and effort that people put into that day was shown at the yacht club all the way through, and will be shown in the yacht club. I couldn't believe the generosity from the local people, and the amount of time and effort the club members put in that day. And you've got to remember, a lot of them, their boats were beyond repair, but they're helping pull out other boats. Just forgetting their boats. But it was an absolute disaster that day.
Probably one of the biggest differences over the years has been that the membership has changed from being predominantly a visiting club or a holiday club to now a predominantly local club. So one of the lessons we learned out of the whole safe harbour process was to really engage with the community, which we've been doing and working really hard at. We've got some tremendous sailing programs which help in that area, but one of the other areas is just communicating really well with the Shire, and also with the security of our tenure for the next 21 years at least, with some sound, solid professional management, our growing youth and junior fleets. We look really in a positive, solid, secure direction for the future.
I'm Michelle Pickford, and my role at the Mornington Yacht Club is to look after the training and development throughout the Yacht Club. It's been a fantastic role that's allowed me to continue what the club believes is a very important role for the club, and that is getting people to learn how to sail, to come and get involved, the enjoyment of social sailing, going out racing, cruising, or whatever it might be. The club has always been very strong in believing that introducing people to our wonderful sport will introduce them to a lifestyle that will last forever. And since the club began, it has had very successful programs, both for youth and also for adults. There are many fond memories of the Max Rod and Bill Turner sailing etiquette of the club. Lots of people remember them out on their training boat, yelling them, telling everybody what to do. And I hope that in our role that we can continue the memories that have happened from the start of our club. We are very lucky at Mornington to be able to provide a lot of programs for people of all abilities, sailability, for older people, for the youth, for our 4 to 6 year olds, 7 to 12, and of course everywhere in between. And the way that the world is today, I've been able to come into the club and make sure that our safety is up to where it needs to be, that our instructors are accredited, because that's what we all look for these days, is for our children or our partners or ourselves to be involved in a terrific activity that we know is safe, fun, and maybe at the end of it we might get a certificate, but not always important. Here at Mornington, we try to keep up to date with what's going on locally and within the government. All of our courses, we're proud to say, incorporate water safety for anybody that comes along and participates with us, whether it's their boating or power boating, that they learn about the safety involved being around the water. Our community scholarship scheme has also enabled us to get youth, local community youth, to come and be involved, learn about sailing, power boating, or simply get involved in the club in a volunteer basis of race management, maybe going out and starting some races. The Mornington Yacht Club has just so many opportunities available to anybody that wishes to have a go. And sail training, we believe, can be one of the first ways that they can get their toe wet, so to speak. In 2012, the club was honoured to win both the Yacht Club of the Year, but also Training Centre of the Year, which just highlights the passion and dedication that the club has to making things run smoothly and also provide a really quality program. Through this and through our reputation, I believe that Mornington Yacht Club is a fantastic centre to be able to provide people with that first experience. Young or old, come out, come and learn and be part of a terrific club, a terrific community, and make it yours. That's what it's all about.
Hello, I'm Graham Lyle. I'm the Sailability Coordinator here at the Mornington Yacht Club. The Sailability program is all about bringing sailing to people of all abilities, whether that is no disability whatsoever, or it could be age impairment, or it could be a physical or an intellectual disability. We cater for all sort of categories, all abilities, and we have boats and equipment ready to get anybody and everybody on the water.
Must have been a real thrill, this wild thing here for the father of a son.
It was amazing.
It was really amazing.
It was amazing.
and it was great for the club, and he was he always talked about competing as a Mornington Yacht Club member.
Absolutely. I'm very proud of being Mornington Club members.
So then we had the third wild thing, which was an Andy Dowell designed 70-footer.
Yes, yes.
Launched in 1998. And that was the boat that sailed in the disastrous 1998 Sydney to Hobart.
Yep, that's right. And from memory, that time, one they split the mast.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They had to turn around and go back because it was, in those days, of course, as a carpenter and a privateer, if I can put it that way, it was nearly all second-hand equipment, and a lot of the equipment was left over from the 12-metre boats.
Oh, was it?
Yes, I forget how he got onto all of that, but the 12-metre boats were housed in the state rivers or sewerage place in Craigie Road, and he got onto all the equipment there and bought spare masts and sails and all sorts of things.
And then in 2003, we had the Don Jones design 30-metre Scandia.
Yep, the 100-footer. Well, later became the 100-footer. It was extended a couple of times.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it was the first canting keel Super Maxi.
Yes, I believe so. And he copped a lot of criticism for all of that, which was not justified, I don't think, but however, that was the way the thing worked.
So who actually designed, was that a Don Jones idea?
All Don Jones, as I recall. The sad part was that the hydraulics for operating the keel had been under-designed by Melbourne Engineering Company. Yeah. And that was pretty sad when the keel came off it.
That's when the keel came off in the Hobart, wasn't it?
That's right. That's right.
I remember seeing the footage on TV of the.
I've got some good photos of that.
Upside down.
David's got.
So that was really a really exciting era. We're sorry we don't have a Wild Thing Scandia still in the club.
Well, it is a shame because I know at the time that it was moored here, Grant put a lot of work in with the Ports and Harbours.
Yep.
And they were offering all sorts of wonderful dredging and giving him extra depth and all the rest of it because the design was improving all the time and the draft was getting deeper and deeper, and at low tide it used to sit on the bottom.
We had a pontoon out from the side of the pier.
We had a pontoon out to keep it out into deeper water.
Yeah.
But it was just impossible, and of course every time the southerly busters came in, you had to disappear with it back to Melbourne.
So everyone who saw Wild Thing racing it used to race occasionally in the Thursday night twilight race and start hours behind everyone else and scuttling through.
Only do one lap or something.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. No, we used to do 2 laps, didn't we?
Yeah,
2 laps, and everybody else did the 1. That's right. And I remember being on board with Faye Schulte one night, and Grant said, "Oh, there you go, Faye. That's we're just going past an S&S 34. You remember when Hank had one?" And we just zoomed past.
Yeah,
she couldn't believe it.
Great time.
Great times.
Well, thanks very much for your recollections.
Pleasure.
A pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Stuart.
Beached and battered, the line of washed-up yachts provided a sorry attraction at Mornington Pier, especially for the owners.
4 boats underwater, one was totally disintegrated and is gone. There's a lot of unfortunate owners out there at the moment.
At the peak of the storm, owners could only watch as winds gusting over 130 kilometres an hour hammered their prized yachts, snapping them from their moorings. Boats were damaged right around the bay, but Mornington suffered the most because of its exposure. The freak storm renewing calls for a $15 million marina to be established at the ageing pier.
A boat brought down a jetty at the worst of was barely recovered by a diver. The Yacht Club has long lobbied for a safe harbour to be built here. It will argue the point with more vigour from now.
The salvage operation here will take days. The Mornington Yacht Club says the damage shows the need for government funding for a protected harbour.
The worst that the members of the Yacht Club have ever seen come through Mornington.
We're really lucky as a club to have such a great position right here on the foreshore in the Mornington Harbour. One of the few clubs that actually are right up against the water's edge. It's terrific when you're sailing on twilight sailing and so forth, when the club's entertaining upstairs and you can sail right in and get right into the club. It's unique. It's unique on the bay. The other thing we're really unique in having nowadays is having a slipway that actually can potentially be viable. So we're actually looking at restoring the slipway and keeping the slipway, and that was a big decision for the club to make, to do that, because obviously it costs a lot of money to look after that. So we're putting that together at the moment. We're also looking at rejigging the yard to make it more usable for the types of boats that we're now sailing, such as the hard stand boats that you can see behind me, and in doing so we'd like to also raise the landing that's behind us up to the level of the footpath to get the cranes off the footpath, because the footpath's now become more of a public walkway than what it used to be years ago. So we're doing those works to create all that, and along with looking at one day wanting to try and put a junior clubhouse over the top of the winch house down the back, which is another use of the space, because we have to obviously try and create as much yard space as we can with as little infrastructure in as possible.
Over the years, thousands. 10 years. Ready to retire. My son sails, one of my 4 children sails, and 2 of my grandchildren sail.
My father started sailing here in the early 70s, and I picked that up as a youngster here and always sailed out of Mornington. Very passionate about our club and our sport and getting others to be involved in it and enjoy it. So it's been the last 10 years we've pushed. Our juniors fell away, the club was probably falling away as well, and we've had now some really big success that we're about to hear about shortly from some of the other guys. John O'Neat and Nick Sharman have just had some recent success, which has been at a record for the club. I think we've probably had more in the last 3 years than the 50, 70 years of the club's history, which is fantastic to see the work and the juniors growing, both here at the club and travelling around Australia, and just more and more kids involved in what is a great sport. 2 years beforehand, in 2012, we were offered the Australian Optimist Championships to host at Mornington. We took that on. I'd sailed a lot internationally and seen a lot of sports. I thought there was another way of delivering junior sport. We'd had some very long days on the water, and we set about creating a carnival. And it ended up being Australia's largest ever regatta for a one design class, 343 boats. Enormously successful, and very proud of the success in leading a fantastic team for Mornington to deliver that. And that's certainly been part of our journey in regrowing the youth and the juniors, and in fact regrowing the whole club. So that big event, massive marquee, and cleared the yard out. A lot of clubs have asked how we could have such a huge input. We had every previous Commodore still alive working in the club during the event, which just shows Mornington, it's a big club, but it's a little big club, and that gives us an advantage at times with our volunteers and the work rate and the work ethic we have as a group. There's a real passionate number of sailors within the club that drive. I think that there's a lot of history here. We've sailed big boats as youngsters. We've had ocean racing boats right up to 100-foot maxis, Wild Thing. That's probably inspired us all in our own way. And we've grown up doing a little bit of both. So it's unique to be able to sail dinghies and large boats. Our racing water here is extremely close to the club. We're protected some of the time in our harbour, but certainly the history of others before us, right back to the Australian Sabo Championships in around the early 60s, when Tin Sutcliffe won the Australian Championships. It's all history that inspired me, and I hope that's inspired the guys that are now around having a go at the sport.
I got involved with sailing. Obviously my old man was involved, and his father before him, and yeah, he got me down as a 7-year-old and got into sailing, and yeah, just got me hooked on the club, hooked on the place, and yeah, the sport. So I started sailing at Mornington in a Sabo, so that was the junior class at the time, and then sailed in that until I was too big and I couldn't really float it. And then I went into the 420s and did that till I was about an 18-year-old, and then started uni and looked around at different classes and got into the Contender. And Mornington was sort of my home base for 5 years as I sort of set on this path for myself to have a crack to do really well in the Contenders. Sailing the Contenders, I got the opportunity to go overseas, and I came 10th in my first Worlds, and that sort of planted the seed to want to keep training at home and building up for the next competitions. So from there I ended up coming second overseas, and then got to win one in Australia in Brisbane in 2010. And it was just such a nice feeling for myself, all that hard work, all the hard training, slowly moving up, beating the other guys. Very satisfying feeling, and yeah, for all the young guys on that path, it's worth the effort, so yeah, stick at it.
I started in the Tackers fleet at Mornington Yacht Club when I was about 8 years old. Used to come down here on Sundays and have a lot of fun in the plastic opties. I guess I kind of just got hooked from there, and really enjoyed it. Couldn't wait till the Sunday of each week so I could come down here and have a sail around the harbour. Yeah, so the 420's been really instrumental into growing as a youth sailor. So I started out in the 420s when I was 15, after I'd aged out of opties. Getting into the class, it was pretty full on. There was a lot more stuff to think about in the boat, and yeah, it was a bit of a challenge. But as we progressed, you know, we really started to enjoy it, liked the racing side of it, and got pretty competitive. So our first nationals were down in Sorrento, where we did all right, but we knew that we needed to come back to Mornington, do a bit of hard training for the next year's nationals over in Western Australia. So at Western Australia, we felt pretty prepared, and we came home with some pretty good results, but still knew that we probably had a little bit more in us. And this year for the New South Wales nationals, we were aiming for the podium, which luckily we came away with. In Western Australia, we got a podium result which qualified us for the VIS, and over the course of this year we had a lot of support from the VIS, which helped us come away with the double win from the New South Wales Nationals just recently. Yeah, so it's been really good. I've learned a lot of travelling abroad through sailing. So first off, my first overseas trip was to New Zealand to do the New Zealand Nationals. That was really good. I kind of got the bug for travel and sailing. After that, I qualified for the Asian Championships over in Japan, and that again was really good. I met heaps of new people, got to challenge myself with some really tricky racing, and then finally I've been to Germany for the 420 Worlds last year, which was really good. Got to race in a really high profile European fleet, Well, while I've been overseas, I've represented proudly Mornington Yacht Club. You know, I couldn't be overseas and going all these places without the club. It's taught me so much about sailing in different conditions, and I've had a lot of support from the members and members of the committee and generally just everyone at the yacht club to do these kinds of things.
Yeah, being the junior captain here at Mornington this year is really great. It's, you know, boys above me played that role really well, and I've looked up to them, and it feels really good to be able to help the younger kids that are here now at the moment and see them and help them through their sailing journeys. I think Mornington's a really beautiful place to sail. I love all the cliffs and stuff here, and sailing here like anywhere else is, you know, it's great freedom and the adrenaline of sailing, and all the friends that I've made here, and the environment that we have with all of us. So I know there's a lot of us here currently in the youth who really want to take our sailing journeys to the top level, you know, Olympics and so on, and I think the rest of our group, it'd be great to just continue and keep everyone in the sport and see it grow, and the juniors and the youths that we have here at the moment keep going through their pathway and keep moving on.
No, it was no longer fun, and it was too heavy. I couldn't do it, so any time anything happened, they pushed me down underneath them. Wait a minute.
It's sort of surprising there wasn't a yacht club here before 1946, because the Royal Brighton Yacht Club started their Easter regatta sailing to Mornington in the 1890s, and we've got some early photographs of some of those boats here. And there was obviously sailing, quite active sailing in certain parts of the year. Now, admittedly, that was the keel boats, and you guys were sailing off the beach boats, so there probably weren't keel boats here in the harbour.
Anyway, as the afternoon went on, there was a terrible storm, and we were worried about all the boats, you know, where they were, and you couldn't see anything. It was just rain and fog and everything about. And there was one particular boat we were worried about. Some of the boats had got home by that stage, and this little trail sailor, 16-footer, he went down in the race, and to our delight, he came past that cliff, and we gradually saw him with tattered sails and masts. His boat was, you know, all the sails were ripped and things like that, and he motored around the pier, and we were so glad to see him, you know, that particular day. You've had 2 since to retrieve a Waco boat, haven't you?
No, only one.
Only one?
We've had some other boats. Other rescue boats.
Yeah, we've only ever had 3 retrievers.
If there's one thing in the early committee minutes that had overdone, it's the role of associates, what they can and couldn't do.
Well,
it wasn't until Jennifer Willie joined, and Nia Legg joined the committee, which was a fair bit later.
My grandparents came over from England about the turn of the century. There were 4 brothers, and my father was the youngest, and 4 brothers got this old yacht, and which they launched off the beach, and they took my father, who was the youngest brother, and before they went out, their mother said to him, "If you come home drowned, I'll kill you."
Both my sons were avid sailors, and no matter what the weather, they would go out. So I went out to the top of the cliff there and I watched them, and I could see that they were having problems because the northerly had suddenly swung round to a southwesterly, and instead of coming in, they had bottled, and they were both in the water, and their boat was being blown out to sea into the middle of the bay. So I raced down in the car to the pier, and I went along to all the fishermen who were moored along the pier, and I said, I want some help, I want some help. And one man came out and he said, what do you want, love? I said, my boys are out in the middle of the bay and they'll drown if I don't get to them. He said, hop on board. So I hopped on this fishing boat and we went out into the middle of the bay and we picked the boys up. Of course, they were delighted to be picked up, but they were more concerned about their boat. So they said, where's the boat? Well, the boat was now halfway out into the bay. So the fisherman very kindly said, okay, we'll go and get your boat. So he used an expletive before the boat, I might add. So we went out and we actually got the boat. We managed to get hold of it and put a tow line onto it, and we towed the boat back here into Mornington.
Here we ask you to raise your glasses and toast Mornington Yacht Club in its 70th year.
Mornington
Pleasure to be here today to see the Yacht program in action. In the early days, in the 50s, we had a mixed bag of boats, all sorts. We struggled to get them all together to race. And then we had some parents who were interested in their children training, and we elected to have some Sabo class yachts. Not unlike the little Opties you see out here today. A little faster, but not as stable and not as good for teaching people. The program today is sensational. To see 30 boats out there, to see the little ones training with a rope attached, and then the mid-range, and then to look right out to see them out there is absolutely fantastic. Strong parent involvement and kids enjoying themselves. That's what sailing's all about.
Well, thanks, Cheryl. I think it'll be absolutely wonderful working with you. I think you'll be an absolutely brilliant Commodore. I don't mind if it's a female or a male. I think it's just wonderful that Mornington's moving ahead. And I think it's also, I'm very fortunate to be working here in Mornington. I feel very passionate about junior sailing and sailing in general, that everyone in Mornington should be sailing. And this is the place where it's going to happen, and I'm so pleased that I've got a Commodore that's passionate about sailing and junior sailing as well.
As you've seen over the last 40 minutes or so, the Mornington Yacht Club has come a long way since its initiation back in 1946. The development and the hard work from a lot of members and volunteers over all those years see us in a position now of quite a lot of strength. Our fleets have grown to sizes to what we had post 1983. Our junior fleets, as you have seen today, are looking really good, and our fleets right through are starting to grow. With our 21-year lease now in place for our future, and our new CEO in position, we look like we're in a really good, strong place for the future. And the best part about it is that we are now about to have our first lady Commodore in Cheryl, and Cheryl's going to do an absolutely fantastic job.
Thanks, Graham. I'm really excited about the next 2 years. We've got a lot of support from past Commodores. They've really stepped up behind me. The same with Rod, our new CEO. Looking forward to working with him and having the backup of a really good committee, and it's onward and upward for Team NYC.